It's showtime. And I see in front of me a crowd of very eager people to listen to our keynote speaker this evening. But before we go there, I want to welcome all of the instructors and students who are attending the Taos Writers Conference. We made it through day one. And I'm sure tomorrow will be just as wonderful. Day two, a whole new roster of faculty. My name is Jan Smith, and I get to be the executive director of SOMOS. Supervisor one time when, we had to do that annual evaluation thing. And I said to her, this is my dream job. Even though I did something else for 30 years on the East Coast, this has been my dream job since 2014. So, I don't know, I'm 73 now. I don't look it though, right? But we'll see how long I can keep going. So I first want to credit Jean Marie Saporito tonight because she is the reason that our illustrious keynote speaker, Nick Flynn, is here. She just couldn't, well, she'll tell you the story. She'll tell you the story about how she asked him. But she did give me his email address. And I love it when that happens because then I don't have to go through an agent because the agent takes a percentage on top of everything else. So whenever I can find somebody who knows somebody, that is the greatest. So if any of you know any famous writers or poets, please let me know or drop me an email at SOMOS. So I have known Jean Marie since 2009. We were in a memoir workshop together. She had already, I believe, completed her MFA at that point, or was in it? I don't remember. But at any rate, we were in a workshop with Veronica Golos, who's here this evening, and also with Connie Josephs, who teaches every year the online memoir workshop because it always has a wait list, so I can't say no. Anyway, so we were to write a workshop together, and she has been a long time teacher at SOMOS, both at the conference, which she'll be teaching tomorrow afternoon, as well as some independent workshops that she's taught. I know you got your MFA before I did. When did you graduate?
2011.
Yeah, you did. I didn't get mine until 2014. So she was ahead of the curve. And she was one of the people responsible for I don't know, at least half of our class that went on to get their MFAs. There's even somebody who's teaching tomorrow who has a double major MFA. Well, it's actually a triple major MFA, fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And she's teaching tomorrow afternoon also. So I try to bring you the best and the brightest. So Jean Marie, thank you so much for being willing to do the introduction of Nick and also for bringing him here.
Oh, Jan, it doesn't matter your age, you cannot retire. Retirement, no. Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you so much, Jan, and thanks SOMOS, and thanks everyone for showing up. This is wonderful. So I was at a workshop with Nick. Neither of us can remember if it was last year or the year before, but at some point recently, I was at a workshop with Nick, and I said to him, what do you think about Taos? And he was like, yeah. So, my people, Jan, talked to him, his people, him. Yeah, his people, which were him, and it happened. And so here we are today. So I'm thrilled to introduce, really, a friend and a mentor. Okay, so you can read about his books and his accolades and the film based on his work on his website. And instead of listing those, I want to share some of what I've learned from Nick over the years, from his workshops, from his Substack, which you can subscribe, and from reading his work. There they are. Some of us are going to be in his workshop tomorrow, but most won't. So I offer you this, a bit of his generosity and wisdom. These are Nick Flynn's rules for writing. Number 1, there are no rules. Number 2, allow that first draft to flow from your subconscious. Also the second and even the third. They are all drafts until they aren't. 3, write those drafts in longhand, pencil to paper. Nick is sure there's some scientific reason for this, but he doesn't know what it is, nor does he care. 4, writing is more about love than work. Honor your work, honor your love. 5, if you cry while you're reading your own work, you've done well. If someone else cries while listening to your work, you've done better. First person to cry in his workshop gets a gold star and a tissue. 6, mind the gems in your work, trust their glitter. 7, write into the bewilderment, into the wonder, into the abyss, then keep writing. 8, disrupt the expectations of the reader. And 9, which is my all-time favorite, keep it weird. That's it.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that. I'm now going to read a list of rules that I have. I'm really thrilled to be here. I've been to Taos a couple times before, and it's such a magical place. It's not really hard when someone says, "Would you like to come to Taos and do something?" It's like, well, of course. It's really very easy. It was an easy thing to do. So I'm going to read from this piece, this talk. There'll be some slides. This is a boat I lived on that I'm writing about right now. I lived on it in my 20s, which was a long time ago. And it just sort of has risen up and become something I'm writing about now. Okay, so I'll read some things here. Read memoirs. Yeah, it's going to be mostly about memoir and creative nonfiction, this piece. Read memoirs to get a glimpse of what it's like to be someone else, to spend some time wandering their inner landscape. We do this because people, even those closest to us, are essentially unknowable. That's one version. The other version is that we read memoirs as a way to hold a mirror up to our own lives. The job of the writer in this version is to create a scrim for the reader to project herself upon. The reader doesn't open your book to find you. They open your book to find themselves. In this version, memoir becomes, paradoxically, the least ego-driven of the genres. At least that's what I tell myself. I haven't written 4 now, I'm counting. That line I started on, I'm the most, I'm the least egotistical person alive. That line I started with, by the way, that people are essentially unknowable, that is what I call an unstable declarative statement. Joan Didion starts her essay, The White Album, with such an unstable declarative. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. One way we know it is unstable is she spends the rest of the essay telling us how this project of transforming our lives into stories is a form of delusion. And yet in the end, paradoxically, this is exactly what she does. Hello. Sorry. Annie Dillard, in her essay, A Total Eclipse, offers us her own unstable declarative. We teach our children one thing and one thing only, to wake up. I call this unstable because, of course, we teach our children many things. how to tie their own shoes, how to wipe their own asses, the ABCs. Maybe, ideally, some of us teach our children how to metaphorically wake up. But we know Diller's statement is unstable by the certainty with which she presents it. We teach our children only one thing only. Both of these statements, the Didion and the Dillard, though unstable, reveal something about the inner life of the writers and our engines that get the essays moving. I've been working on a book for the past 2 years that circles around my time living on a boat, that boat that you used to see. Here's one possible beginning I've come up with. I woke up one day and I was working on a pier. I was the captain. My job was to watch the moorings, to ferry people to shore once they tied up their boats. My job was to sign them in, to collect the fee. I am the ferryman, I tell myself, and these are my dead. My workboats are named Deliverance and Patience. Today is deliverance, tomorrow is patience. I fire up the engines, circle the field. I am a shepherd, I tell myself, and these are my sheep. If someone waves from their deck, I'll tie up beside them. I might even say, ahoy. I like this because it brings us onto the water right at the start. I like that I get to use the word ahoy. I started this talk with an unstable declarative that people are essentially unknowable. It's no coincidence that this is also a theme that runs through my current project, which, along with being about a boat, is also about a friend I made in those years. His name was Richard. With this in mind, here's another possible beginning. The end keeps getting pushed further away. Richard in his room, the ashtray by his bed overflowing. It's nearly summer. We've lived together off and on for 5 years or so now. We're in Boston, in the loft. The boat is 100 miles away, on land for another winter. He comes in from the brightness of the front to the darkness of the back. We haven't spoken in days. What's going on, I ask? Is something wrong? Though I know everything is wrong. This is a darker beginning. It points toward the end. One introduces the boat and water, and one introduces my friend and uncertainty. The end getting pushed further and further away. Both beginnings locate us in time, my 20s, and space, the boat, while focusing on someone that isn't me, Richard. I think this is necessary for any memoir, to be located in time and space, and to look outside yourself. Either or both of these beginnings could work, or not. I'm keeping it very fluid for now. But how do you discover what your project is, you may ask? Paradoxically, I'd say you discover it by writing it, by finding what interests you, by noticing what snags in your subconscious. You do this by listening closely, by honoring your mistakes, by seeing where you are resisting the material. Maybe you meditate, maybe you go for a walk, maybe you look away from whatever it is you think you need to write about, only to find that whatever seemingly distracted you might be a threshold you need to cross. I'm thinking of how you could be sitting at the bedside of a loved one who may or may not make it, how you go to the window and see a swallow has made a nest in the eaves, how that nest becomes a portal back to the home you shared with your loved one, who is still, for the moment, breathing beside you. You discover it by writing it until it finds you. Here's where I found this project, this boat project. I'd published a book a couple years ago, and I was then cast into a period I like, which is wandering in the unknown. I was simply alive, not in the middle of a book, which is what I imagine it's like for most normal people. I do think that writing is a form of mental illness. not feeling compelled to transform everything I see into language. When I teach, I also write alongside my students. I do this to see if what I'm asking them to do is even possible. For the first few months teaching, I began working on a piece that involved my daughter's ex-boyfriend, Jude. Jude was her first boyfriend. It lasted a few months, but by the end, it wasn't going very well. He was, perhaps, a little too in love with the games on his phone. He must have known he was on the way out when, on her birthday, he brought her a gift. It was a large bag. He had walked across Brooklyn carrying it. Inside the bag was a lamp. It seemed like a strange present for a 15-year-old to give to a girl. And the thing was, it wasn't a very good-looking lamp. The color was puce. It was squat. The lampshade unremarkable. After that night, we never saw him again. I have to return to that essay. My daughter placed the lamp beside her bed, so it became the last thing she touched before she went to sleep. Sometimes an object can hold all of our emotional energy. There's a term for this. T.S. Eliot called it the objective correlative. A set of objects, a situation, a chain of events, which shall be the formula of that particular emotion. It's the way an object can contain our emotional energy. Jude had transformed himself into a lamp. The lamp is still there. Jude is gone. Now my daughter loves the lamp. The idea behind an objective correlative has been around for a long time. The ancient Greeks had the concept of the sema, which is a story made visible. Think of the bed in the Odyssey, how it is carved out of a living tree, which represents, on one level, the way the marriage of Ulysses and Penelope keeps growing. Freud and Breuer came up with the idea of cathexis as a means of achieving catharsis. Think of a child's teddy bear as a cathectic object, in that it holds many complex emotions: security, home, love, etc. In African cultures, the Nakandi, a statue. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, did I forget the Nakandi? Oh, okay, never mind. The Nakandi, the statue is so cool, I'll just describe it. I had a picture of it, but I didn't put it in. A statue outside the healer's hut that you can drive a nail into before a major life event contains the hopes and anxieties of the tribe. Have you guys seen those? You've seen those in museums? Those like little statues that they put outside, and then they're all covered with nails. And, I guess once it gets filled with nails, they sell them to museums, I guess. I spent a few months circling around Jude and his lamp in my writing until one day the boat appeared. It was as simple as that. The boat was a time in my life that I hadn't written about much, and Richard was a friend I'd only vaguely sketched the outline of in my first book. It was apparently time. I spent the past 2 years circling around what I remembered of the boat, of Richard. I believe in trying to write out all you can remember of your project before you attempt any real research. When writing memoir, our main tool is memory. It's right there in the word. Just like the word try is right there in the word essay. Essay from the French essayer, to try. Both are attempts. Neither can fully capture what it's like, what it is to be alive, but we can attempt to come close. Once I had exhausted all I could remember, I began to do the research. Adrian Rich offers this: once you live in a piece of your vision, it opens you to a constant onslaught of necessities, of horrors, but of wonders too, of possibilities, like meteor showers all the time, bombardment, constant connections. At some point, a film was made of a book I had written. Richard had appeared in that book, as we had been roommates during the years the book covered. That book was about my time working at a homeless shelter. This book is about the same years, though focused on the boat. In the summers, I'd live in the boat and drive the 2 hours back and forth to work my shifts in the shelter. When the film came out, Richard's sister emailed me asking why I'd done that to Richard. The actor in the film portrayed Richard as stereotypically gay, which would have horrified Richard, as he wasn't stereotypically anything. I commiserated with her, told her I winced every time the actor who played him appeared on screen. It was also bad acting, really. I'm not sure which is worse, like stereotyping or just bad acting. Many years passed. I could talk about that for a second. My wife's an actor, and she says the thing about acting is you have to work against the expectation. And I think it works for writing also. Like if a bad actor, if they're supposed to be drunk, will walk into a room and like stumble over things and knock things over. And a good actor will hold himself more upright and straighter, because that's what you do when you're drunk. You try not to look drunk. You try to look the opposite of it. It's the same with, it's just, it's sort of, these are like sort of basic acting things, and he didn't take that class, I think. Many years passed. His sister and I stayed in touch sporadically. During COVID, she reached out, asking if I could connect her with a friend of Richard's, Barker, who had taken some pictures of him. I tracked Barker down. We met in his studio. He showed me photos he'd taken of Richard over the years, gave me the names of a few other people I should talk to: John Worry, Rick Cologne. He mentioned a friend I'd never heard of, Richard Morrison. Morrison was an artist. I looked him up, found a film he had made of the artist David Woronovich on YouTube. In it, Woronovich talks about his rage at the US government's response to the AIDS crisis, which is essentially no response. It was the years of silence equals death. Woronovich stitched his lips shut to embody how he and all those with AIDS were being silenced. On the same YouTube page, I found a film Woronovich had made called Heroin. When I met Richard, he was trying to kick heroin. The film is mostly a series of people who have fallen where they stood, apparently after shooting up. One of the fallen, I believe, is Richard. I typed Richard and Woronovich's name into the search engine and found an art review of a piece called Strange Fruit. A few years ago, I'd stood before a roped-off room in the Whitney, the floor covered with the skins of desiccated fruit. Bananas, oranges, grapefruits, and lemons, hundreds of them, as one critic noted, consumed and then stitched back together by the artist using brightly colored thread and wire. Some were also held together with buttons, some with zippers. The artist is Zoe Leonard. I felt mournful and melancholic standing before it, but I couldn't say exactly why. I'd met Zoe the last year the boat was in the water. For a few days, she considered taking it over, but then she moved to Alaska. Of that time, she has said, the process of mending the fruit skins was not art making, but rather a way of dealing with the trauma of losing many of my friends to AIDS. Over the years that I was in Provincetown, I started sewing these things obsessively by myself. The review mentioned that the work was dedicated to two of her dead friends. One was David Woronovich, the other was Richard. I didn't know Zoe knew Richard. I relate all this to you to show you what I mean by research. I'd been working on the book for 2 years. I'd come to the end of what I could remember. Then I began to move outward, to remember that Richard had a life outside of and before our friendship. But the more people I speak to, the more complex the story becomes. Some had no idea he had a heroin habit. Most couldn't name any lovers. Almost no one knew where he was from. Instead of clarifying Richard, all these stories made him more of an enigma. One friend agreed to speak with me if I didn't try to unscramble him. I made it clear that I didn't think that it was possible to unscramble Richard. You know the film Rashomon, the 1950 Kurosawa film? Speaking with Richard's friends has begun to feel like Rashomon. The film is the source of what's called the Rashomon effect, in which several and conflicting stories of the same event are presented. It's left to the audience, or the reader, or the judge, or the survivors to decide what is real. I watched it a couple nights ago. It begins with three men in the ruins of a temple. It's raining hard. The first words are, "I don't understand. I just don't understand." One man tears pieces of wood from the walls to make a fire. The same man repeats, "I don't understand it at all. I just don't understand." One of the stars of it was the great Mifune. This guy, he plays the bandit who probably killed the samurai because they found him riding on his horse afterwards. And he tells a story that sort of glorifies himself and justifies why he did it. But then the film has four other versions of it, of the same story. One of the versions is sort of wonderfully they get a medium to contact the dead man, and he tells his story of what happened. A woman sort of acts out the story, and then we get to see his version of it being acted out. Richard and I worked in the same restaurant the first summer the boat was in Provincetown. It seemed like it was his first summer as well. We became friends. I'd show him the best places to swim, the cheapest places to eat. But talking to those who knew him before I did, I've learned that he had been in that town for nearly 10 years, though he never mentioned that to me. And it seemed like he knew no one. I don't understand it at all. Richard died of AIDS 9 years after we met. I was with him those last days as he was drifting away. I held his hand and spoke with him. They say that's the thing to do, that hearing is the last sense to go. Think of one of the greatest first lines in American literature. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" Do people know that line? You know what book that is?
Charlotte's Web.
Charlotte's Web, yeah. What a great way to start a children's book, right? Where's Papa going with that axe? And he's going to kill the hero of the book. He's going to kill Wilbur, right? Yeah. And then it's sort of, so this, of course, where's Papa going with that axe? This, of course, is the first line of Charlotte's Web. It contains all the energy of the whole, struggle and mortality and friendship and love. The first few lines of any project are important. Everything else will flow from them. I refuse to believe that E.B. White willed those words into existence. I believe this is another unstable declarative, so just, when I say, if you start a sentence with "I refuse to believe," you know I'm drifting far into my own realm. I refuse to believe that E.B. White willed those words into existence. I believe they arose organically from the story he was already in the middle of finding. Here's what I believe. You cannot will the first lines of your project into being, or any of the lines that follow. You have to find them by looking through what you have already written until they fall into place, like a key in a lock. Here's another way I might start my book. And that's what I've done. I've sort of gone through and I've written for 2 years. I sort of look and I try to find things that could be possible beginnings, and then it sort of changes everything that comes after it. Here's another way I might start my book. When rowing, you face away from where you want to be until all you see is where you've been. You put your back into it. The boat you live on gets smaller and smaller. The time you work in gets further and further away. Once you leave, the seagulls come back. You watch as they land on the foredeck. As you return, they will reluctantly lift off and flap back out to sea. I like this because it places us in a scene, but the scene is indeterminate, like Zoe Leonard's Strange Fruit. An indeterminate image forces the reader to participate in the act of making meaning. This is what the postmodernists taught us. It makes the act of reading an active rather than a passive experience. Or, as Whitman once said, about 100 years before the postmodern moment, the process of reading is not a half sleep, but, in the highest sense, an exercise, a gymnast struggle. The reader is to do something for himself, must be on the alert, must find him or herself construct indeed the poem, argument, history, metaphysical essay. The text furnishing the hints, the clue, the start or framework. Not the book needs to be so much a complete thing, but the reader of the book does. Vivian Gornick, in her book, The Situation in the Story, argues that a successful memoir ties the story of the author's life into the larger situation it is happening within. History, world events, the moon landing. I would agree with that. Even a memoir that is, say, about being locked up in an asylum as a teenager, like Girl Interrupted, reveals the society that locks teenagers up in asylums. The memoirs I tend to be drawn toward perhaps fall into what we now call creative nonfiction, which perhaps was once called new journalism, where the situation is filtered through the consciousness of a particular writer. Again, think of Joan Didion writing about LA in the late 60s. We could say Frank McCourt and Mary Carr are the Whitman and Dickinson of American memoirs, following on the heels of Didion and Dillard, Mailer and Conroy. Then came the many memoirs you perhaps haven't heard of: D.J. Waldy's Holy Land, Sarah Manguzo's Ongoingness. Maybe you have heard of them. Then for a while, there was the spate of fake memoirs. James Fry and his Million Little Pieces, and that guy who said he was a Native American, and the white woman who said she'd been raised by the Crips, and the guy who said a little girl fed him through the fence when he was a prisoner during the Holocaust. This made memoir feel a little like the Wild West of literature, filled with fakers and charlatans and snake oil salesmen. Each had some kernel of truth, but each learned to sensationalize and fabricate to juice and fabrication. Each leaned into sensationalizing and fabrication to juice the story. The pattern of these fake memoirs is generally someone from a more privileged background taking on the identity of someone from a less privileged background, circling around some trauma. Was James Fry an addict? We may never know. Was Margaret Seltzer raised by the Crips? Not even close. As a teacher, I believe I can spot when a student is trying to juice their story with some borrowed trauma. It creates a glitch in the writing. I remember a student writing about a friend who committed suicide, but there was something off about it. In conference, she admitted that she'd made that part up, that she was worried that without it, her writing would be boring. I reminded her of John Berryman's dictum: "It's not a poet's job to play fast and loose with the facts of this world." No, this is from a poet who has written a poem in which the sheep are talking, wondering when the barker, the dog, will come. But what the sheep is concerned with, as far as we can tell from close observation, is what a sheep would be concerned with. I too believe in not playing fast and loose with the facts of this world. There are laws to the universe. There's the physics of the natural world. There's cause and effect. One thing leads to another. When James Fry starts his book waking up from a blackout on an airplane, bleeding from a hole in his cheek, his clothes covered in vomit, I sensed a glitch. From this, the first page. I've been on a lot of planes, and I can say I have never seen anyone in that condition allowed on board. His book came out at a time when we, the United States, had just gotten into a war that would go on to kill nearly 1 million people, half of them civilians. A war that was justified by evidence that a child could see was fabricated. It led to the world we live in now, where our dear leader doesn't seem even capable of opening his mouth without a lie coming out. So I try not to play fast and loose with the facts of this world. Another writer, a writer I admire a great deal, has a different philosophy. I heard him in a radio interview once say that if your aunt's thing was to make a fantastic apple pie, but for whatever purpose you want it to be a blueberry pie, then you as the author are entitled to say she made a fantastic blueberry pie. I disagree with that. I say you could say you wish you had made a blueberry pie, that you prefer blueberry pie, but it's your job, if you're going to drag your poor aunt into your sordid memoir, to respect the pie she actually did make. Maybe you could ask her about it. Maybe she had an apple tree in her yard growing up. Maybe she was allergic to blueberries. It would only make your memoir more interesting and less glitchy. I do believe that memoir, to succeed, does require us to take deep dives into the psychic realms, diving into the wreck, as Adrienne Rich calls it, to access the material. Otherwise, it is, as Thomas de Quincey, who wrote Confessions of an English Opium Eater, said, "Wearisome and useless when merely chronologically arranged as a slavish narrative of events. This merely produced the hackneyed roll call of a man's life. The essence of any life was its doubleness, its exterior and interior existences, and the access to these was governed by single scenes and deep impressions. These deep dives take a lot of psychic energy, and so you have to make sure you're in good shape, physically, spiritually, psychically. If you're doing it right, you have to be careful. It is dangerous work. Now, when a young writer comes to me and says, 'What can I write about? Nothing bad has happened to me,' I comfort them by saying, 'Just wait. It's coming.' In the end, the good news is the same as the bad news. Life, by definition, will include some level of suffering. As Flynn said, approximately, anyone who has survived childhood has enough to write about for a lifetime. I'm going to read briefly from the book that I'm working on. And then I think we could do some Q&A, a little Q&A. Yeah, so you will ask me the questions. When rowing, you face away from where you want to be until all you see is where you've been. As you row in, you watch as the boat you live on gets smaller and smaller. You put your back into it and watch as the seagulls circle and land on the cabin roof. As you row back out, the houses that line the shore get further and further away. You hear as the seagulls reluctantly lift off and flap back out to sea. These are the years of waiting for the flood that never came. Or maybe it had already come and no one noticed. Maybe all the clocks stayed lit. Maybe all the trees had more trees hidden inside them. Maybe one wave became 100 waves. If you're surrounded by water, how can you know if the world has flooded? Would the sky be closer? The stars? Here's a photograph of you, shirtless and alone, in the room you created from nothing, from the ruins of nothing. The walls pocked with holes, the paint flaking off, the pipe seeped rust. Your sculptures, molded plaster painted to look like Pompeii, seem to rise up from the dust around you. That cigarette in your hand, held forever before your face, is how I remember you. The ashtray overflowing, your chair draped in a sheet. You were one of Michelangelo's slaves, pulling your body from the stone you were born in. Your eyes look away, as if something outside the window were calling you. Maybe another room, maybe the storm that was always inside you. You lean into it. Thank you.